Could I just ask everyone to take their seats because we will be beginning shortly. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to open the meeting and welcome everyone present and also welcome those who are watching us on live streaming. So, nau mai, haere mai, and let's begin our strategy, policy and finance meeting for this morning. Now, I'll just ask for apologies. I have two already from Councillor Rotorua Tate and Mrs Mohi. I move that they be accepted. Oh, thank you, Mayor Chadwick. Moved Mayor Chadwick and seconded Mrs Trumper. Are there any other apologies? No. In that case, all those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I declare an interest in the speed limit bylaw review and will not take part in that discussion because I actually presented the case for Brunswick Drive.
Thank you, Councillor Kent, for that. There are no further declarations of interest. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda today? No, it appears not. Great. So we'll now move on to page 6, a confirmation of the minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 12th of October 2017. And may I have a mover, Councillor Gould, thank you, and a seconder, Councillor Donaldson, for those minutes. Now, are there any corrections to those that anyone wishes to raise? No, in that case, thank you. I'll just put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Now, we're just going to have a change of item on the agenda. I wish to bring the recommendation forward, and that's the business case for the Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre. There will be a presentation from Henry Weston, Stuart Brown and Brett Marvelly, who are all present here. And that's page 65 for everyone. And I'll just call for a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Sturt. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Now, I'd just like to welcome, invite Henry Weston, Stuart Brown and Brett Marvelly to overview the report. So please, gentlemen, come and join the presenters table. Yes.
Just before they begin, I will be leaving at 11. I'm working with Metro Mayors on the UN Compact City, so it's good that we're taking that message further. Thank you for changing the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Chadwick. Yes, we're very happy to release you for that important work. Now, I hand it over to you, Mr. Weston.
Morena, Madam Chair and tēnā koutou, councillors and board members. So just a very quick introduction before I hand on to the team. And really this is part of our annual plan direction to come back to councillors with a further enhanced, further developed value plan for both the earthquake strengthening and renovation of the Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre. And the timing's probably particularly apt in that it brings together 3 or 4 chunks of work, really. Work that's been going on since about 2014 with the wider Rotorua community in terms of developing an understanding of the performing arts community and their needs and wants. It's part of the annual plan commitment, as I've said. It's presenting you with the business case, the value case, and as you all know from our discussion last week, it's also timely in the sense that we've closed the building on the basis of detailed seismic assessment that was carried out. So really to hand on to the team, and just by way of introduction, Stuart obviously needs no further introduction. We've got Brett Marvelly, who's been working with us on this. And again, Brett probably doesn't need a lot of introduction to you, a very well-known figure in the arts, tourism and business sectors in Rotorua. And we've also got Brendan Smith from Delve Research, who will present the findings really from the work he's done with our community and the performing arts audiences. So I'll just hand on to Stuart to lead you through it.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Henry. Morena koutou, everybody. Someone got the... no. Yeah. Oh, thank you. All right, just really leading on from Henry, that this work has been going on from some time. Back in 2014, the community engagement, those people who remember the pop-up shop, and that time we had a lot of feedback from the community, was that we needed to revitalise the performing arts in Rotorua, which prompted us to look at Shimpack. At that point, the facility was underutilised. Oh, thank you. And at that point, and remembering back that the original building was built as a convention centre, didn't meet the needs of the performing arts community. So how did we get here? In about, I think, June earlier this year, the annual plan consultation process, a business case was brought before councillors that estimated the refurbishment at that time and EQ work for Shimpack at around 6.5 million. At that point, it was felt that the value of the improvements or the value case for that work wasn't clearly understood, and we were asked to develop that the value proposition, the business case, and bring that back to council, which we're currently doing. Really, and that's just the statement or the agreed from the deliberations back in June. Right, so this is the first time that council have used the New Zealand Treasury's Better Business Case model. So what this really does to this process, it provides some real rigour to the business case. It provides really, the primary objective of it is to enable smart investment decisions for public value, so it's not just looking at financial contribution. It also, the process helps reduce the cost of producing business cases, and this 5-case model is really provides a discipline and a step-by-step approach to help and ensure that each key aspect of a robust investment proposal is explicitly and systematically addressed. So just quickly to go around, the 5 cases here, the strategic case, this really deals with how this work aligns with Rotorua 2030, the Rotorua Way. The economic case is really looks at all the options that are presented and what the preferred option is. Commercial case is really, is it commercially viable? The financial case is around available funding. And the management cases, is it doable within the management capability? Can we deliver it? Yeah.
Kia ora, councillors. From my perspective, as an operator and as a sort of the business side of it, I've been amazed. The rigorous process that we've actually gone through to get to where we've got to has been quite amazing. So just like to sort of endorse that.
Thanks, Brett. Right, so current status. As you'll be aware, we closed the facility last week due to the MBS rating. Utilisation prior to closure of the whole facility was around about 30%. The building was renamed. this is Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre 2014, but no investment to date has been made in making those spaces fit for a performing arts centre. The general decor is tired, and the ambience is very corporate, which was very much around the convention centre look. And the operating model is pretty much a venue for hire. We open the doors, we let operators in, but we don't really engage with them too much other than that. And the venue's expensive to hire, really because of its configuration. I'd now like to introduce Brendan Smith. He's from Delve Research, who did the research for us from the audience perspective.
Thank you, Stuart. Tēnā koutou katoa. So we did a range of research to understand the performing arts audience within Rotorua. So we did 4 strands to it. The first strand was a representative sample of the Rotorua population, which we did represented by age, gender and ethnicity. We also did a survey of the arts database, email database for the performing arts. So we sent it out to 5,000 email members on that, which we got back about 250 responses. We also talked to 50 international visitors over at the iSite face-to-face about their needs and behaviours and what they're looking to do in Rotorua. And then lastly, we went out and did some qualitative in-depth interviews with 12 people that we spoke to within the surveys to better understand their barriers and levers to growth for performing arts. So this research brings together all of that, all of those findings. Predominantly focuses on the Rotorua representative survey though, in these stuff. Oh, sorry. So of interest, we wanted to size the market. How many people are interested in performing arts? So we asked them a range of performing arts genres. Which of these are you interested in? And we did it in this way because if we asked people straight out, are you interested in performing arts? Well, what is performing arts? So we defined it for them and gave them the genres and said, which of these are you interested in? What it came to is the vast majority of the population are interested in performing arts in some way, shape or form, 92%. Obviously that spans a whole range of genres from the more mainstream things such as comedians or school shows and theatres to the more niche sort of genres such as clairvoyance or hypnotists or opera. So a broad range of interests and what they're sort of engaging with as well. So the vast majority of people are interested in performing arts. We then asked, well, which of these are you attending? So 66% or 2/3 of the Rotorua population have attended performing arts in the last year. We then can break that down into, well, where did you attend them? Because obviously they can attend them in Rotorua or they could attend them somewhere else. So when we break that down, the attendance down, 28% of the population attended performing arts only in Rotorua. A further 27% attended performing arts in Rotorua as well as going elsewhere, and that could be to other cities like Tauranga, Hamilton, Auckland or wherever. And then there's a chunk, 10% of our population only attends performing arts outside of Rotorua. So that gives you a bit of an understanding that there's actually quite a big chunk who are going outside of Rotorua to get their performing arts needs met. When we look at what sort of genres that they're attending, the highest ones tended to be the school shows, theatre and plays, kapahaka, large musicals, and popular music such as concerts. Obviously of interest, we're trying to drive attendance or understand what would drive attendance at SHIMPAC as well as performing arts in general. When we asked them what would encourage you to attend events at SHIMPAC, overwhelmingly the response was, well, it's actually about the quality of the shows. If you have the quality of the shows, the types of shows, the range of shows, we will come. And when we looked at why performing arts fans look to go to events outside of Rotorua, why did you go outside of there instead of coming to Rotorua? The quality of the show, the types of shows that were on offer. What stops people attending more shows in Rotorua? It's the same thing. And we've just put a few different quotes of various punters around Rotorua who back that up. When we've gone to talk to internationals, so we've asked them, what sort of activities are you interested in doing in Rotorua? Obviously the main ones sit at the top. They're here for tourism. They're here to hot pools, the tourist attractions, the geothermal parks, less so for performing arts. So you've got performances or musical concerts that they're not really looking to go to as yet. It's an untapped need. But they're also here for the Māori cultural shows, the museum art exhibitions and such as that. That's one that we want to grow, obviously. And when we've gone and talked to them about their views on and perceptions of Rotorua, the vast majority of them think Rotorua is a vibrant and active, is an active and vibrant city. The vast majority of them feel like that their needs are being met during the daytime in terms of the activities that are available. But what's missing for them is that significantly less visitors feel like their needs are being met at night time. So that sort of opens up an opportunity to present whatever it is, and performing arts should play a role within here to help meet their needs during the night.
Can I jump in there, Brendan, a little bit? Just to come back to that international graph there. We all know in Rotorua that we attract around about 10,000 visitors a night. We know that's coming through. We know that's broken down with a sort of 60-40 domestic to international. But it's a market that we've never gone through. As far as the performing arts, and the Howard Morris Performing Arts Centre, we've never ever gone out to that market to say we have 10,000 people here, but we have a show on. And I'd have thought the other day, you know, like I was in Vietnam a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting. The old story is you go on, and I'll imagine you councillors are much the same. You go away somewhere, you go, what's on? And you say, oh yeah, that's on, right, I might do that. It might be a show in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever it is. And we went online, and it was a show at the Opera House in Ho Chi Minh City. Very interesting, couple of interesting things. There's shows at between 6 and 7, so it means you can actually have a drink beforehand, go to the show, and go out to a restaurant afterwards. But it was about the Vietnamese people, a very interesting show. So why wouldn't we create a show? So Howard Morrison's life, you know, going through the ages. Do it properly. Go to Creative New Zealand, get a really good script, get a musical director, and create that show. So every night we could have a show on of something like between 6 and 7. We've got stories in Rotorua. We're very lucky in Rotorua. We are a city that's got a heart. We can do another show, Te Tanako and Hinimā. Now, when you look at a marketing perspective, we talk about the old days of a theatre just having theatre hire, $1,000, and that's it. So you have the promoter that goes in, he pays $1,000, here's a successful show, he walks out with $60,000. Doesn't quite equate. But in a situation like that, if we create our own show, we have the ownership of that show. We have that show of, say, 150 people, 200 people going through a night. That equates to around about $50,000 a week if you're doing it over a 7-day period. And of course, that doesn't even tie in food and beverage, which is another operation to that. The need for that, though, is to have two separate operators, so i.e. a civic theatre, and you do need another theatre. So you can have the community event, for instance, going in one theatre, and you can have your commercial going through the other side. So that's, sorry, Brendan, for jumping in there, but just brings back to perspective of we do have a market, a huge market, which we have not tapped.
Yeah. I just might add as well, councillors, that remembering that the museum has a very active marketing campaign to tourists. Around about 30% of the visitors to Rotorua Museum are tourists, and they contribute about 50% of the total revenue, or about $1.2, $1.3 million to the museum's revenue.
Cool. Within the research, obviously what we wanted to do was say, what are people doing in terms of the behaviours, what are their perceptions of the market? But ultimately what we really wanted to do was explore the opportunities for growth. We identified 4 particular opportunities in the full report. These are all fleshed out in exact numbers. But we saw the 4 opportunities being increasing the frequency of attendance of those who are currently going to shows in Rotorua. What can we do to get them going out more in Rotorua? Instead of going out 3.6 times a year, can we get them to go out 4.6 times a year? The second opportunity was converting those who are going elsewhere. They're going outside of Rotorua for shows. What can we do to stop them going outside of Rotorua for shows and get them to come and even just do one more show back in Rotorua? The third one's about those who say that they're interested in performing arts, but they're not currently going out. So again, about understanding what's stopping them, what could encourage them to start going out. And then the fourth one would be about, as we've just talked about, encouraging attendance amongst visitors, and that goes beyond the internationals within the domestic market as well. The key theme that ran across all those, as I mentioned before, was unlocking those opportunities was largely focused on the types and the qualities of shows that we deliver, but it's also about effectively marketing them, letting people know that they're out there. We can't just put them on and not market them. So that's a key strand of how do we unlock that growth as well. And as I said, we put some numbers behind things. So we looked at the current spend of performing arts at Rotorua residents. Starting on the right-hand side, how we got to those numbers. So 56% of Rotorua residents of households are attending shows in Rotorua. They're going to 3.6 shows on average, and they're spending $101 per event on each show. Extrapolate that outwards, you get $5 million. On the left-hand side, you've got 37% of Rotorua residents are visiting a show outside of Rotorua. They're also going to 3.6 shows outside of Rotorua per year, but they're spending $219 per show. They spend a lot more when they go to Auckland on some of the shows, or wherever they go to. Extrapolate that number out, you get 7.2 million per year. Add those two together, you get $12.2 million spent on performing arts by our population, and as you can see, a big chunk of that is going outside of our region to whether it be Auckland, Tauranga, Hamilton. So when we looked at growing opportunities, if we could convert people to go more in Rotorua or to stop going elsewhere and coming in Rotorua, we saw an opportunity between 1.2 and 2.4 million in terms of a stretch target and a conservative target of what we could get per year if we could encourage them to just go to one more show in Rotorua per year. But outside of the performing arts market, obviously there's accommodation, there's food and beverage, there's retail, there's whatever they spend while they're here as well. So that doesn't include any of that. So the opportunities for growth in terms of finance would be larger, much larger than the 12 million that's just in the performing arts. Kia ora, to Brett.
Sorry, turn your mic on.
Sorry, councillors. Higher feedback. None of these comments were really surprising to us. We looked at that, we knew that. But what this does give us the opportunity, and it's a pretty exciting opportunity where we're going through at the moment. We know that if we go through the process which we're going through, and it does sort of get the approval from you guys, we can actually offer an absolute wow factor. Our Sir Harold Morrison Performing Arts Centre, it's got it all there. The bricks and mortar's there. It's a bit squeaky at the moment because of the seismic situation, but it's a wonderful building. It's got great bones, and it's also got great location. And quite often, you'll always hear that situation: location, location, location. And we've got that. And if you look at that from Arawa Street and from Fenton Street, and look at that building, that could be highlighted as something which is extremely special. A building that we can feel very proud of for generations to come. So those comments don't bother us so much because we're looking to the future, we're moving forward. What we do know is that at present configuration, it lacks the flexibility that we require for niche groups. So at the moment, in its present situation, it does lack that, and something we've got to look at. Sir Harold Morrison Performing Arts Centre also needs just titivating. We need to go right through the whole thing. But from my side of it, I think, Stuart, it comes back to you. Yeah, those comments do not worry us at all. Okay, from a personal side of it, I can understand this. The Civic Theatre doesn't offer everything to everyone, and nor should it. In life you need options, but we do need to have another theatre that can offer something a bit different. With shows, a lot of shows will bypass us. I'm talking about not the young, but the smaller show that wants something quite intimate. So they do not want to be into the Civic Theatre with a 686 auditorium when they're going to attract 150 people when they're trying to put on a very intimate show. So those shows will move through. But what we're trying to do is to create an option which does have a second show or second theatre which can actually highlight the 250 to 300 people that can come through, and the people of Rotorua can enjoy the shows which will come through. It also, as I said before, does offer the opportunity for us to run something which is very community-based in one theatre. So you might have a high school doing their musical as much as having a commercial base going through the same side. So with that, in the present situation, we have not got that versatility. So, yeah.
Thanks, Brett. All right, now strategic alignment. So these are the things that councillors have asked us to deliver in terms of the 2030 and how SHIMPAC aligns to and contributes to those goals from 2030. I'm not going to go through them all, I think they're pretty familiar with everybody, but they do contribute to key strengths or outcomes that we want to see for the future of Rotorua, and that is around strong culture, easy lifestyle and diverse opportunities. All right, so this is just really to give councillors just a quick snapshot of the ground floor if you haven't been through SHIMPAC recently or in the last little while. So the main foyer area, the chamber comms to the right, which is the heritage part, as are the changing rooms behind it. Civic Theatre, the fly tower at the back, and obviously the curved banquet room and the toilet facility and office block there on the left. venue upgrade options. So what we did is and this is really part of that better business case process, we looked at 7 options, ranging from demolition and to total rebuild, and retaining the status quo. Each investment option was assessed on those various objectives. Excuse me, I can't quite read that. So they were around optimising value, a contemporary performing arts space, facilities and equipment and services that are competitive in the market, and that we meet our legislative requirements around EQ, and a vibrancy in the place. Critical success factors, strategic fit to 2030, value for money, achievable of the investment objectives, capability, and potential affordability. All right, so option 1, which is our baseline. So this is really simply about completing the earthquake strengthening to bring the building up to 67%. So those councillors that weren't here last week when I presented the issues, if you look at all the lines in red, they are all the walls, bracing, connections that fall below the 34% NBS standard. So most of those sit currently around 25 to 30. So it's a considerable amount of space on both sides, including the foyer area. What you're looking here in terms of total investment of the 2.7 to 4.5, the key issue here is that this is a very large range, as we don't have detailed design yet, and we can't narrow that down at this point. There's too many unknowns. I guess the key benefit to this, it's the lowest cost, it makes the building safe, but the drawbacks, it doesn't really meet any of our performing arts objectives. It doesn't give us flexible space, and it certainly won't address audience or higher needs.
So, just to sort of go back on that, or to highlight what Stuart's coming from, the 2.7 to 4.5, it's a minus 15% to plus 25% range. So it could be below 2.7, it could be about 4.5. We don't know that until it actually comes through. But it's interesting to note right now, when we're talking about costings, we have Tauranga about to build a new performing arts centre, $70 million. Hamilton about to build a new performing arts centre, $80 million. And that's just the actual auditorium. That's not what we've got. We've got banquet room. We've got the opportunity of having the concert chamber turn into another theatre. So I'm not sure about, I see Thomas over there, the accountant, but to me, I looked at the other day, our capital valuation of that building is about $10 million, right? And if we're talking about a total rebuild of what we're trying to do to remodernise, to bring it up to the next 30 years of a great operating life, you're talking about probably another maximum, about $12 million. So for $22 million, we've got an asset which is in excess of $80 million. Now, to me, that's a wonderful story to tell the people of Rotorua.
Thanks, Brett. I think the other really important point here, councillors, is that this is a heritage Category 1 building, and potentially central government could be a partner in terms of funding the EQ work. So if you look at Wanganui just recently with the earthquake strengthening of both their museum and the Sargent Gallery, I think it was $19 million. The government's contributing, I think, either 9 or 10 million towards that. All right, so this was option 2, and this was really to demolish and completely rebuild. And whilst this meets all of our objectives in terms of performing arts build with a new bespoke building, it's the most expensive and potentially unaffordable, but we also lose a significant heritage asset to the community. But between, Brett's mentioned, $70 to $80 million, it's just unrealistic, we think. Option 3, so this is the earthquake strengthening work, the upgrade of the concert chamber and the stage apron. So just going back to the staged apron was actually considered for strengthening and making it fit for purpose for a full orchestra when the fly tower was built 2010, I think. But due to funding commitments at that time, it wasn't able to be completed, so that was considered some time ago. The key issue here is that the feedback from users in terms of the civic theatre is that it's too big. Currently it's 670 seats. As Brett mentioned before, it's too small for those intimate community shows, those 100 to 300 type settings. And so this also gives us that second performing space, so we can complete multiple shows at one time. Part of the reason why the costs of hireage are so expensive currently, it's not the actual venue hire. We're pretty much in similar sorts of realms of other performing arts centres around the country. The issue we have, because we don't have a fit-for-purpose facility, is that we have to move in lights and out lights and set up different types of rigs for those small shows, which adds cost to putting those sorts of activities on. The current concert chamber in the last little while pre to closure only had a utilisation of around 22%. Option 4, so once again this is EQ work, substantial refurbishment of the foyer, the banquet room, toilets and new bar. So this largely addresses the issue of poorly presented venue. It's a good utilisation opportunity for us, and it provides revenue growth, particularly around the business events area, and then really maximising, the pre-dinner and after-dinner drinks. If you go, so those people have been to the ATS Centre in Auckland, significant amounts of revenue from those sorts of activities. I'd also, the foyer I think is really, really important here. Because, if you look at the work we're currently doing at Te Aka Māori, we will have a building that reflects our place, our culture in Rotorua. This is another significant community-owned facility, and our entranceways should really reflect our place, and it's a great opportunity for us to do that.
Just jumping in there too, it would be a shame to me if you only did the concert chamber and the strengthening and didn't do the rest, because the rest is a very small part of it, and that's going to give you the wow factor, as I said, for many years. So yeah, it's interesting how we've gone through this process, and I think the next couple of slides will show it again. But you'd really want to do the foyer, you'd really want to do the banquet room, you'd really want to create that bar facility, which offers another revenue stream, but it also offers you another attraction. Imagine once again a themed bar, Sir Howard Morrison themed bar, with all the memorabilia of the Morrison family, or Sir Howard's memorabilia, something quite special that we can feel proud of as a city.
Thanks, Brett. Right, option 5. So option 5 here, once again, it's the EQ work. It's the rebuild of the banquet room into a rectangular form. And this was feedback came back from Hoarth, other consultants, and were used in the business case. Upgrade of the foyer, toilets and bars. So this is the best format for business events and performing arts acoustics in the banquet room. I guess the key drawbacks here are high risk. I think it's really hard to really justify having to dismantle the banquet room. It has been a facility or a room that's used in the past. It is adaptable. It's not ideal, but we just felt that perhaps the risk, high potential reputational risk here. It's a large capital cost, it's a little gain. So when you look at the number of potential use days and operating costs, there's not a lot of difference between option 4 and option 5. So this is like I said, it is Hal's recommendation, but it's not one necessarily that we bought into. Option 6. So option 6 is basically it's option 5 and a refurbish and extended civic theatre to 1,000 seats. Once again, it's best performing arts and business outcomes. All spaces are enhanced, and we have a fit for purpose facility. The 1,000 seats is desirable, and it's desirable because it actually provides promoters with a sensible commercial return on bringing larger shows here. So if you look at the last 2 years, there's been around about 17 shows that have been in Napier, 990 seats. Very limited amount of those shows have been to Rotorua because of our capacity, or they've just basically just not profitable in a 660 seat setting. Option 6A, and we've highlighted this separately because this is potentially a project that could be done separately and at a later date if required. So this is option 4 plus EQ and the extension of this of the Civic Theatre. So this is leaving the banquet room in its current configuration. The key benefits here that all spaces are enhanced. There's good revenue opportunity here for us, good performing arts outcomes, all spaces and the foyer all enhanced, and will be in a very competitive venue space. The key drawbacks is it is significant cost, but like this could be done in stage with option 4 and 6A at a later stage, potentially with funding. Yeah.
So if you could just go back to the slide, yeah. Okay, so just going back to the slide here, and I want to just touch on funding, because we do believe there's private funding out there. And there's no reason why, for instance, where the concert chamber is there, that's not the Sir Owen Glenn Theatre or the Barry Coleman Theatre. So Howard Morrison's Bar could easily be funded outside that. The other thing is those costs we have in there, that's not the actual finality as far as the actual design is concerned. So that's at the other extreme. So for instance, in that cost there, the design was to take out that wall that goes through between the banquet room and the foyer. We don't necessarily think that's right. So they're the other. We are asking for other designs to come through which could easily bring those costs down. So going back to the costs, there is opportunity of private funding. There's no doubt about that. And that name, Sir Howard Morrison, will bring that funding in. The other thing too with costings, and it's something which is diversifying a little bit, but one of those things we had which came through was the cost of the theatre from that's in the community side of it. So high school said it was too expensive, One of the things we learnt when we went to Auckland, what they do, and their management team, any community event that comes in, the management team are required to be on that event. Because what happens in a lot of community events, they don't realise the costings. They might go for a 7-day or a 7-day performance when it only needs 3 days. They don't know the markets. So the costing's not necessarily there. In any business situation, when you look at a business module, you always look at the costs and the revenue, and then you balance the two together, and then you look at the market. So what we're saying, the module we've been using in the past is not a good module. Okay, but so the operational side of the Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre will be totally revigorated to have a commercial operation, which is also very, very geared to the community, but also as a revenue earner. So that's about it really for things. Stuart, you got it forward.
Thanks. So here's a summary of the options and our preferred, or what staff are recommending here. They're not the preferred options of Holworth. Holworth believe in options 5 and 6, but we think realistically the differences between option 4, 5, or option 4 and option 6A are negligible in terms of capital investment for return. So that's the overview. Yeah. Our recommended approach is that the commercial design phase for option 4 and 6A, we want to, or like to think we can commit to option 4 in terms of this detailed design. It delivers most of the investment objectives. It meets most of our critical success factors. It's competitive. It's potentially affordable with funding. If we look at a 33% external funding stream. Option 6A, yes, look, we also like to complete detailed design on that option as well, but once again, that could be staged and subject to funding. If we look at the option 4 investment objectives, value. We meet the contemporary aspirations for performing arts space. It meets legislation. The question mark around competitiveness is simply around the 1,000 seat capacity that we currently don't have in the Civic Theatre, and it's a little bit bizarre, really. But the Civic was 1,000 seats some years ago before we changed it back. It obviously meets the vibrancy and makes a statement of who we are. And then obviously strategic fit, it really, or critical success factors, it hits those things that councillors have challenged us on in terms of strategic fit around 2030. It is value for money. It meets our objectives, and look, certainly we have the capability and capacity to deliver this, and it's obviously potentially affordable. I'd probably like, if you just to cast your mind back, Councillor, I think if you go back to those long-serving councillors in 2005, 2006, Greg McManus was pretty much in the same position as Chimpak is here, where the museum was back then. And if you roll the clock forward, we talk about back then, we didn't have a fit-for-purpose museum. We couldn't provide those sorts of exhibitions the community wanted. The building was tired. Roll the clock forward with, I know, significant investment, but also with external funding. You now have a museum that's moved from 15,000 resident visits a year to just under 40,000. We have a revenue growth stream there that's moved from 800,000 to just under, potentially would have been 3 million with the Lions tour last year. And we're making huge contributions to the Rotorua economic growth as well. A lot of the exhibitions that we currently couldn't have done in 2006 can be done now. They were doing them in-house. We're utilising local tradesmen to deliver those sorts of activities. So I guess what I'm saying here that look, we definitely have the capability to deliver the aspirations of this project. Next steps. Yeah, if you like.
So just to jump in on this and to be clear really with what we're asking, because I think we need to open it up for the discussion. Really we're asking at this stage for you to accept the value case that's being presented to you and to essentially give us the tick to move ahead to some more detailed design, and that would be within the $1 million funding that was already agreed in this year's annual plan. Obviously the longer term discussion around funding of the actual build, it slips across into the long-term planning process that we're working through with you. So at this stage we're really asking for you to accept the value case and to move into the detailed design.
Thank you very much for that very thorough and detailed PowerPoint that you've given us that really has canvassed a lot of the research that's gone on. I'm going to open it up for questions now, and I have Councillor Donaldson followed by Mayor Chadwick, and then I have Councillor Sturt followed by Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thanks for the presentation, gentlemen. And I thought I had a question, but it was then answered by Brett, and that was, we know from Delve why the audience have, or what their preference is. It's all about the show more than the facility. But then it was, how do you get the shows and what barriers does the facility put up to getting those shows secure? And I think that's been answered. But my remaining question is, with option 4, have you got any sort of pictorial of the facade, of what the facade would look like, or changes to the facade? Can you describe that?
No, not yet, Councillor. That will come in the detailed design phase. And we obviously, need to think about engaging local artists to have some, some local input and that, like I said before, that look and feel.
And my reason, Madam Chair, for asking that question was, I think there's a balance to be made with the new police station on the other corner for that whole facade on Fenton Street. So,
Thank you. Mayor Chadwick.
Thank you for the presentation, and I think what we learn is we know so much more than we did in the annual plan process prior to this earthquake. I do believe this is an opportunity that we weren't expecting, actually. And the sadness of the earthquake and the community response of its closure has been quite overwhelming in the circles that I'm out and about in the community with. So doing nothing's not an option, and we've got to do something. And I think it's between the sweet space of approving. It's not either 4 and 6A. There's sort of some steps and bits that we could take out, as you mentioned, Stuart, about the staged approach. It could be modified as you go through so that we can stretch this. And you made a different comparison to the museum, which I think is another discussion for another day. But I remember at this stage, when we were looking at the museum to go out for external funding, we were a bit shocked at the price till the Crown came in. And I remember when the Crown came in, they said, stretch it. When you stretch it, you can do it. So I'd like to see in the going out with the funding options for design, we can see the stages that could be brought in. So the time frame for the stages, that would then help us engage these other partners. The only other observation for me is that I think we've got to be very cognizant of what's happening around us, and we've got to move to 1,000 seating capacity at the minimum, or else we're losing another competitive and market edge for the new way that we want to run the facility, and I'm pleased to see that change came in as well. So it's really about, could you put some time frames as well as the costings, because it becomes more achievable rather than a total shock to our community, that we're not saying we're going to do $9.7 million next year. We're saying that we could start to stage and move this out perhaps over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'd like to see that come back, and you did sort of mention it, Stuart, but you're really asking us to approve a 4 or a 6A, or both.
In terms of just going to the next design phase, yes. In terms of a staged approach, yes, we could do that. But the potential there is that with earthquake strengthening and then coming back having to do the staged approach is likely to close the facility for a longer term, potentially.
Councillor Sturt.
In the 1990s, I find this discussion quite ironic because there was 3 councillors, Councillor Minty, Councillor Maxwell and myself, who absolutely fought to have a bigger auditorium than what's there now, and we were denied that, and I just think they did it because obviously we couldn't afford it. Stuart, I applaud you in your comments on what Greg did at the museum. He saw commercial opportunities and an opportunity to sell high quality giftware and carvings and things like that. And with the introduction of the cafe, it turned the museum around. We always had top quality exhibitions, but we couldn't because of the atmospherics, and we sorted that out. So what I'm saying is I'm of a mind that we look at both options 4 and 6A, but when we changed the Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre in the late 1990s, the biggest noose around their neck was the Historic Places Trust, in allowing us to alter and compromise the integrity. I don't want to see a square box there, I'll be quite honest with you. I will oppose that. I believe the flow of the building in the semicircle, I agree to upgrade the 1,000, but I think there are greater commercial opportunities in that event centre. And Brett, you mentioned the bar, I see retail, I see sale opportunities, all that sort of thing.
Councillor Sturt, this is just question at this point, not debate.
Everyone else has made a comment.
Do you have a question, please?
Okay.
Thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your report, gentlemen. My question is, do we have the right attitude or experience to run such a facility at a profitable or break-even basis in Rotorua, and that, to give you an example, the New Zealand Quilt Show was destined to be there in September of next year, and they heard through the media that you'd closed the doors, so they weren't contacted, but they did contact council and were told that no, you'll have to cancel, it's not going to be fixed before then. There wasn't even a hint of saying, hey, it's causing problems for us, how can we work together to find you a different venue? And as a consequence, every other city in New Zealand would be rapt to get 5,000 or 6,000 people through the doors over a 4-day period.
No, they're fine. Look, I'm obviously not aware of that one. Last week when we made the decision to close the building, Jolene and the team were on the phone before the media announcement, contacting as many people as possible. We had something like 90 people to contact in a very short period of time. So, look, apologies to that group if we didn't get to them before the media did. But I'm certainly, what we said was that we would work creatively with the community as best we can to try and reaccommodate shows where we can. We do have some conflicting in terms of the timetable, where we've got already commitments at EEC, for instance, and at this point we're not sure where we'll be with Shimpak in September next year. But look, I'll make sure that they're contacted and we'll work out a solution with them.
Mr. Berryman-Camp, your question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for a comprehensive report. Having worked for a market research company before, I appreciated the numbers. Got to thank you for that. I have 3 questions. The first one is regarding cultural alignment, and I did like some of the stuff that I was hearing, but I am mindful of our partnership. I'm mindful of Rotorua, our quest to become a bilingual city. I can see the marketing advantages, but I guess one of the things that in terms of cultural alignment, what I wanted to know is how is Te Arawa going to be involved in this refurb? And I understand from the facade, and I'm getting a bit of a feel that that's part of the thing, but I was also wanting to know how Sir Howard's whānau are involved. I totally get that it's an opportunity, but it's his name on that building. And I'd just like to know, how is his whānau involved, and how are you going to make sure that the cultural fit is incorporated into the build? That's question number 1. Sorry.
Is that a little bit for you? I have been in contact with Malcolm Short in regard to funding, actually, in the Sir Howard Morrison bar, and he was very, very strong in the fact that they'd love to be involved. Very much in that. I've also had contact with Howard Jr. And Richard in regard to the Morrison family, and they're very, very supportive. I obviously haven't gone into too much detail because I think that's quite commercial, but they want to be very much involved. So, yeah.
And maybe if I can just talk a little bit about cultural alignment. So obviously when we did the redevelopment of the library, we engaged with Ngā Hangatoi to assist us with the cultural elements of that, and I'd imagine that we were working through a similar sort of process, maybe a different group, but certainly that would certainly be part of how we work through the next phase.
All right, thank you for that. My second question is regarding community impact, and I am pleased to hear that dual use concept, that there'll be the opportunity for the community to use. Certainly involved in schools myself, I'm aware of the issue with the cost, I get some of that. But I am wondering, what I haven't seen is the impact on other community facilities, the little theatres. I have no idea how this fits with the event centre. If you're talking up a 1,000 seat facility, is that potentially going to be cannibalising market share from that? Can you give me a little bit of an idea as to what thoughts gone into what impact this will have on current community performing centres, even though they might be little, and also on the event centre?
Right, so fairly we just to address the smaller theatre groups, so Little Theatre, Music Theatre. We've actually engaged with them in this process, so some of their feedback has actually gone into particularly these sort of thoughts behind the concert chamber refurbishment. So they do want to use their facility. They've got Mary Poppins booked with us for next year. We're obviously having to consider relocate that to the EEC currently. In terms of competitive for 1,000 seats, I think we're looking completely different venue types here. So the EEC is really built around large conventions, 1,000, 2,000 people, whereas, and also a sports facility as well in terms of netball, basketball. This is a purpose-built facility for performing arts. So these are those large shows where you don't get the acoustics at the EEC, you don't get the same ambience. So they're very, very quite different opportunities, I think.
So, and just my last question, which I think you may have touched to, certainly through Te Tātou, we got a bit of feedback within the last week, aligned to some of the cancellations that have gone thing. I'm aware the primary school Kapahaka Festival, that was just on. I'm aware of what you've said in terms of the short term, contacting current bookings, but what is the long-term plan B, given I'm, again, a little unsure as to how long this might take?
So I guess Plan B determines a lot on the decision that's made today. So obviously if we can't continue through to detailed design, this delays significantly before we could possibly open Shimpak. What that does is that will impact on community events because we can't jam them all into the EEC. They have conflicting timetables whilst we are working with people to adapt. Effectively, it could mean that some community events may not be able to proceed, or there will be some financial impact where we have contractual arrangements for commercial activities that we would need to counsel in order to put community events in. So long term it is expensive, just the short term closure that we had earlier this year with Shimpak, just to get Boney M up and running at the EEC was a cost of $25,000 for one night.
And just probably going a little bit further, if we can get the guidelines to go forward, operationally we can go forward as well. So that probably answers Councillor Bentley's question before about management structures and how we can change what we're doing at the moment to being better. So that there's a process we've got to go through as well to bring these things forward. So hopefully, if everything's closed, we can still move. Once it's open, we're moving. We're ready to go. So it's both. It's hens and chickens.
I now have Councillor Gould, Councillor Maxwell and then Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report this morning. I've got three questions. Your Ticketmaster and your plans which you put up on the screen before, you didn't show the Ticketmaster office was going to be there. Is it going to be at a different place? That's the first question.
Yeah, Councillor, we haven't made any decisions where the best place is for Ticketmaster. I mean, there is some views that if we want to engage more with the tourism market, then perhaps we should be looking at Ticketmaster potentially at the eyesight as an opportunity. But currently it's relocated at the EEC, while Shimpak is closed. But look, we haven't got that level of detail yet.
Second question is to do with the, I'm quite happy for the strengthening process to be done. That's not a problem at all. But options 4 and option 6A, how long would it take to finish that particular project? Because that's going to be the key, whether that place is going to be closed for 1, 2, 3 years, that I don't know.
Look, I'm just not in a position to be able to give that information until we have detailed design about exactly what has to be done. It's a little bit unclear at this point. But I mean, it's months of work.
Third question is to do with your price estimates. If it's delayed, those price estimates are going to have to go up, possibly because of the commitments by outside contractors and national operators. So is your price, which you've told us today, how is it relevant for the next 12 months, 2 years, or what?
Look, I'm not sure whether I can answer that, Councillor. At the moment, we only have a really wide range of what those costs might look like. Until we actually get down to the detail and making some decisions on, some of the larger aspects that Brett mentioned before about some of the things that were included in those prices, and we discount those. I can't really comment at this point.
Councillor Maxwell.
My questions were in, or some of the questions that were there, and I'll just wait back, but I'd like to indicate that I'd like to move the motion when...
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I recollect correctly, the proposed project for Shimpak was put out to public consultation with an anticipated budget of $6 million. The feedback that we got back from the public was a resounding no. They did not want this council to spend $6 million. And against that decision, steer from our ratepayers and against my vote, the resolution was made to continue down the track to try and develop a business case. I now see that we are looking at expenditure proposed here, starting probably at 9.7 million, going up to possibly $18 million, that you're expecting us to give you approval now to spend $1 million to plan. If I am not wrong, please confirm that our significance policy requires additional expenditure in excess of $3 million to be taken out to public consultation before we commit to it.
It's not... Point of order, Mayor Chadwick.
We're not looking at needing to trigger any significance policy. We're only being asked to approve today proceeding to advanced drawings within the annual plan $1 million. That's the issue before us.
Madam Chair, Her Worship is stating that we are only approving the planning of spending $12 to $18 million. Sorry, we cannot spend $12 to $18 million without going out to the public, so we shouldn't be planning for it either.
Clarification there, Councillor Kent. Today's approval is for the $1 million that was agreed in the annual plan, so that is existing funds that we have agreed on. It is for the design stage. The quantum that will come out of that design stage will be agreed as part of our LTP process, our long-term planning process. So we will have a better idea once we have committed to those completed designs on what we are up for and how it could be possibly staged. So that money is already in the budget. Now I have Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all staff. I really must commend you for what you've managed to bring to us in a very short amount of time and the way that you have dealt with this situation. But I do want to just share concerns that I'm hearing from the residents that we're trying to be everything to everyone, and increasing concern on the cost, the additional cost beyond what is required. On the things that we are starting to spend. But with those concerns, I do agree with our Mayor that not doing anything is not an option. We can't do it. But I must take the conservative approach with this and to not go too far and too far beyond, because I do agree with
a question, Councillor Tapsell. At this point, I haven't opened yet for debate.
I'm getting to my question, if you don't mind. And so what my question is how did it reach this point where it's only 22% of it is being used, yet you come to us saying marketing is a key strand on how we unlock that growth, and the concerns that were shown by the community. You've even quoted today that those comments don't bother us too much because we are looking to the future. Well, if we are truly looking to the future, then how do we have the capability and capacity within this team when we have done so poorly up until this point? And what is the justification of going far and beyond, carrying on? And the second question that I also had is, what is the longevity of longevity, thank you, of this upgrade that we're going to do, because bearing in mind we're trying to say this is a Rotorua building, yet it's a classical and Spanish design, which is very much not part of Rotorua. So those are my questions, which was on the marketing. What are we going to be doing differently? Because I don't believe we've been doing enough. And also, how long do we expect these changes to make? Because if we look in just our history on the recent upgrades, I mean, it hasn't really been there that long, in all honesty, in its current capacity, when this whole area was just a public square and that building was connected to this building. So do you get what I'm trying to say? It's yeah.
Getting into aspects of what was presented as a business case with a justification for a changed model on the very issues you're concerned about. I wondered if, Jeff, you could answer this, because this has been detailed work that's been built up since we got in 2013.
Through the chair, look, I think there's a number of issues that have been raised. The first issue is the model of operation of the centre, and the business case does not actually indicate that the model of operation as it's been functioning to date continue. In fact, it's suggesting that a new model of operation is put into place. I think it was Stuart that mentioned that the model really, as directed by previous councils, has been a venue for hire model. So in other words, it is a venue, a building that people can seek to hire. There has been no curatorial oversight as to how the building's used. And over and above that, the building, in terms of its design and the changes that have happened, meant that it has moved from a performing arts venue to becoming a mixed-use venue. So it could be used for commercial sort of work as well as performing arts work, which I think, to coin or to quote Dame Jenny Gibbs, when the same debate was held around the Aotea Centre, Dame Jenny was stated, I think, quoted along the lines of, so it's really at the end of the day not fit for anything. And that's fundamentally the situation that we've had. So on one hand, we've got a venue for hire operation, which is not an operation which you would see in a performing arts centre. And secondly, we've got a building that is not actually fit for a performing arts model. So the business case that you've got being presented to you is really quite a change. It's a change in the venue, but it's also a change in the operation. So it's the establishment of a director of performing arts, someone who curates the nature of use of the building and brings together relationships both within the community plus within also promoters. So we see a much higher use. So it's a complete change of use. With regards to the building and its design, I think you make some very good points with regards to the current design ethos of the building, and it is very much a very confused building almost, in that there's a little bit of Spanish in there, as you say, there's a little bit of 1970s in there, as you also say, there's a bit of conventions in there, and there's a little bit of performing arts in there. So it is a building which has grown over time. The design ethos that I've heard being introduced here is one where we need to understand how do we represent this building in the detailed design phase, involving Te Aroha, involving the community into the design process in such a way that what is reflected back at the ultimate stage when a final design decision is made is a building that really does reflect who we are as a community. That's not part of the business case to date. The business case has really been along the lines of saying, should Rotorua is there an opportunity to have a performing arts centre, and what role and function would a performing arts centre play for Rotorua? The question, I think, is also, and I think it was Brett that referred to some very detailed work that's been done in Hamilton and in Tauranga about the importance of performing arts centres. What do they bring for communities? And this is a decision ultimately that you need to make, is does this centre, does a community-based performing arts centre, is that part, I think, to quote one of the presenters, is that really part of the fabric of Rotorua? Is it an important part of the fabric of this community or not? And that ultimately is your decision to make. But look, I'm aware I'm covering ground that you have covered, and there may be other things that you wish to add.
Possibly just on a slightly different tack, but maybe addressing some of the same points, is really around the fact that regardless of the option chosen, we're going to have to do some detailed design work, even if it's just the earthquake strengthening. So what we're proposing is detailed design work which will reflect a range of options, but at the same time for staff to actually start having some conversations out in the community and wider with government around the potential for external funding. So what we would end up with is a pretty clear picture of what we're actually trying to achieve.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I'm now going to move 2 and 3 together, and I'd like a mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. And I'm moving 2 and 3 together because they're both just an issue of the committee noting, so I will read those. The committee notes that the resolution from the annual plan process to commit to further development of the value proposition and bring back to Council for final approval to proceed with the Shimpack enhancement and upgrade. Now, is there any debate required on that? It's simply a noting. If not, all those in favour? Oh, aye, thank you. Sorry, move them separately. I'll just move the next one as well. And yes, and that the committee notes that the detailed seismic assessment for Shimpack has been completed and the building has been closed as it fell well below new building standards. So I will actually move those both together, and you may. So I'll just ask for that agreement. All those. We did actually. We had a mover and a seconder. It simply hasn't been recorded by Hilda at this point. The mover was Councillor Sturt and Councillor Maxwell for 1, and that was moved and carried prior to the presentation. I appreciate it was quite a long time ago. I will move 2 and 3 together, and they have been moved by Councillor Donaldson and seconded by Councillor Maxwell. I'm open that for debate. If there is no debate, well then I'll ask for all those in favour say aye. Against? I think we'll... Okay, thank you. So against is Councillors Sturt, Kent and Kumar and Councillor Bentley. So that's carried. Thank you. We'll do the rest of those individually. Yes, it is just noting that the committee agrees that the attached business case demonstrates the value proposition for both a strengthened and enhanced building. Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Now I'll open that for discussion. There appears none. All right. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? So that is Councillor Sturt, Councillor Kent, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Kumar. Carried. Thank you. So we're up to number 5. That the committee agrees that the preferred option, option 4, involves required earthquake strengthening, modification of the concert chamber to a flexible 100 to 300 seat performance space, and an overhaul of the ambience and capabilities of the foyer and banquet room, including a pre- and post-show bar. Additional options could be explored to refurbish and expand the Civic Centre to 1,000 seats if external funding can be secured, and that is option 6A. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell moved, and Mrs Trumper seconded for that. Now I'll open that for discussion. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, let me thank our gentleman at the table here for a very detailed report. I would have liked to have sat alongside you, Brendan, and gone through even more in depth, but I think the presentation sort of helped us all here. I'm strongly supporting this, and I think earlier on in our debate, I think the Mayor touched on it, which really should hit home. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to really do something that we haven't spent a lot of money on since it's been built in 1940. That's some 77 years ago. And along the way, we've done the odd do the back, up, do the front, and that's helped. And Councillor Sturt was right. We tried some years ago to keep it as a 1,000-seater venue, because being 686 now, many shows will go to Tauranga, Hamilton, bypass us, because 1,000 is about the minimum for many touring shows to actually make a profit. And I'm aware of this because, having been one who's toured on many, many venues around the country with Sir Howard, the quartet, many other entertainers than that, and listening to the promoters themselves, you end up having to do matinees, extra shows, to get in the revenue from that particular area. It's a shame that that the earthquake issue had come along, but it does give us an opportunity, as I said earlier. We probably wouldn't have been having this this discussion and this debate because of the amount of money involved if it was an earthquake-free zone, but we don't have that. We've got issues, yes, with the museum. That's going to be dealt with in time, but we've got a chance to do something here, and that's why I enjoyed the report. The other one is, I think, why I'm supporting the 4A and really to go to 4 to 6A as well, because many people will recall our Energies Event Centre, a $28 million exercise. $14 million was given by RECT, and we as a council spent $6 million. We did really well out of that, and I think Councillor Sturt was our representative on the on the energy centre setup. And look at that beautiful facility. We had the foresight not to do a cheap job and look after all the sports organisations. We did it once, we did it well, and it's a beautiful asset that's mainly for the sports, but it's not for the shows. This theatre, I like some of the forward planning that's been put in here. And you're right, Tauranga, Hamilton, they're going to be spending. You gave us figures of 70 million, 80 million. Well, we're talking about getting a beautiful venue up to 1,000 seats, which might cost something like 9 million to 14 million. It's affordable now. Many years ago, we did not have gaming trusts, and they were a big help to many, many organisations now that are wanting to build good facilities. So, hence, I think my time is coming up, but I do want to support it, and it is a shame that our location was mentioned earlier. It is a beautiful location. It is an icon building in our community. So I strongly support this.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Now I have next, Councillor Kent, was it you that raised your hand to speak next? I'm going to allow 3 for and 3 against in the interests of time, so I will be recording that. I have Mayor Chadwick down to speak next, or before you leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My approach is probably something different on this. Yesterday in a workshop, those present indicated very strongly that there is an urgent need to upgrade the lakefront of Rotorua. There is an opportunity here in terms of an upgrade at that lakefront to actually make a statement and put Rotorua on the map internationally with tourists. I think in terms of the Sydney Opera House, for example, and what that does for tourism and Sydney. And I look at our lakefront here, which quite honestly is an embarrassment when you compare it with the likes of Queenstown, Wellington, Auckland waterfronts. We have an opportunity here to put an iconic building of some description on a pier with the superb backdrop of Lake Rotorua. Now, I don't know, but I suspect that the best possible use for that building could be as a performing arts centre for marriedom, designed to look like a futuristic meeting house with the walker in front of it, designed fit for purpose to actually attract and hold venues, the venue capacities that we want, and to make the statement and actually move Rotorua forward, give it a real kick in the pants. So before we go and spend $1 million trying to turn a sow's ear into a silk purse, because it ain't going to happen, spending $12, $14 million, $18 million on an upgrade to that, I think we should be investigating how best we can spend the money in the interests of Rotorua. And we're going to be short of money because we've got a lot of major projects in the wind. To actually go out and spend this sort of money on this project at this point in time, particularly when the ratepayers out there have already told us loudly and clearly they didn't want us to spend $6 million on this project, and that seems to have been totally forgotten. I think if we continue down that path, would be totally irresponsible. So I urge people to think a little bit further ahead. Stick this on one side for now. We can come back to it if the other option isn't a feasibility. But I lay down the challenge to Te Arawa here and now. Design the building for the future that needs to be on that waterfront and investigate whether it should or should not actually include either a museum or a performing arts centre. Should it be the backdrop for all the kapahaka competitions? The opportunity is massive. It will do a lot more for Rotorua than tarting up this old building.
Mayor Chadwick.
Well, that's an interesting proposition, but that's very futuristic and probably up to $100 million. And we're looking as a destination and a community that Delve tells us, which is research that is far more current, that 75% love the building, 76% say it's worth investing in, and it doesn't currently fit the purpose of where we want to go. I've heard a business case that says we need to change the way we manage this building. It was good in the past, as Councillor Sturt said. It worked when it was a convention centre. Now we want to upgrade it into a proper performing arts centre. I'm certainly in support of this motion, and I've spoken to it before, but I think we've got to be very careful about being too futuristic while we are working up in a very, very beginner phase what we do with the lakefront. This is a building that is empty, is closed, and our community doesn't want to suffer that. We need to move now to approve the $1 million within that envelope to get the detailed business case back to us. We can't be a community without a performing arts centre. We can't be sending all our community groups and those that are wanting to perform here out to various other places in the community. That's a nonsense. We've got a crisis now, and we need to address that crisis, and we've got an opportunity that's come at the same time. I support motion 5.
Thank you. Councillor Sturt.
Having been prevented from asking my question earlier, I do want to ask, I was leading up to it, in the business case, have you considered the on-site cafe, retail and commercial opportunities, and have they been identified?
So, yes, within the business case at Howarth, there is some opportunity for retail and for food and beverage sales. So, look, we haven't got to the detail of what that might look like, this councillor.
Well, that's why I can't support this, because under options 4 and 6A, I'd like us to come. I'd like in the $1 million envelope that we've already provided for in the budget to come back with options 4 and 6A to show us exactly what the configurations are, because number 5 just limits it to option 4. But if there is external funding, and that's a big if, option 6 and 6A will be required. So if I can be assured that option 4, 6 and 6A will be part of the design brief and we'll get options on the different configurations that those provide, I will support this in the interim, because by moving number 5, Councillor Kent, where we differ is we are not committing to the $11.9 million or the $17.5 million at this stage. That will be for further consideration. That's why number 6 is there, that we're enhancing, that we have to do the earthquake strengthening. That's a given regardless. But the committee recommends under 6 to council to proceed to a detailed design work for strengthening and enhancing the building within the already agreed 1 million envelope. Madam Chair, what I need to be assured to support that is that options 4 and 6 and 6A will be within that $1 million envelope, so that we can get a real handle on, so we can go to our community and say, for 11.9 we get this, for 17.5 we get this, for 3 we just get this. And I hear the messages I'm hearing in the community, Madam Chair, that the debt is where it is, whether it's a false impression or not. Adding another 11.9 or 17.5 isn't what I'm hearing out there in the community. They're saying, yes, go ahead and earthquake strengthen. Bearing in mind, Madam Chair, that we haven't got the final costs on what the museum is going to cost our ratepayers as well. We've got a whole lot of balls up in the air that we'd all love to do. Enhancement of Kurau Park, enhancement of the Aquatic Centre, skate park, all sorts of things. We've got debt, which was reported at my committee at 170 million now. So where do we end and where do we stop? So if I can have an assurance from staff that 4 and 6A, the options for both of those will be enhanced, I will be supporting 5 and 6, providing that's within that envelope.
Councillor
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Sturt. Oh, yes.
And it's the point that Councillor Sturt raised. I think option 6 should be taken out of there because it's inconsistent with option 4. It should only be options in the second bracket, option 6A, because that's consistent with option 4.
The mover and seconder are happy, Madam Chair. I'm happy that the preferred option 4 and 6A be in that bracket.
Okay, I was just wondering whether you would support the word including additional options be explored, because if we put in, that's the 4th line down, under banquet room, including a pre and post bar show, including additional options to be explored to refurbish, which is the 6A. So if we add that word including, yes, and so that's as long as the mover and seconder are happy with those 2 amendments. Okay, thank you, Councillor Sturt. We now have Councillor Gould and then Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With recommendation number 4, recommendation 4, number 5, the key wording, if external funding can be secured, and that will apply for either 4 or 6A, because the different funding trusts around New Zealand will support whichever option this council initially agrees to.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think what Councillor Gould is talking about is premature. I understood that, but and I qualified my support, that if 5 and 6 indicate options 4 and 6A, we haven't decided whether we're going out for external funding, and that's why that's an anathema to me, that sentence, if external funding can be secured. I mean, we're going out under 4 and 6A, and I thank you, Hilda, for amending that, within that $1 million envelope. What will come back under those two options, including what I've suggested today and has been taken on board with the commercial side of the retail sales, that type of thing, that will come out in that design. So,
And that's an LTP discussion.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but Madam Chair, I just needed to make sure I was voting correctly.
Yes.
Not under the impression that Councillor Gould has, that we're going to bowl ahead and do it without further consultation.
This is to push the go button on the design phase? Yes. Now, okay, so we have the amended, yes, the Chief Executive will speak.
If I can clarify a couple of the amendments. So as requested, we've removed option 6 from the number 5, and we've also included in 6 clarity that the design work is for options 4 and 6A.
They're in the last line.
We haven't decided. I mean, if 4 comes in with a 4A, we then go out for external funding. I mean, what we're saying is we're not going ahead.
I think 7 says that staff will start looking at external funding options. So it hasn't committed us either way. It's simply to explore commercial funding options at that.
So technically, I think Councillor Sturt is correct. It does say
Yes.
that it makes it dependent.
Okay, in that case, yes, we agree, Councillor Sturt, you're correct, and we will remove that because it does add a level of ambiguity to the recommendation. That's all right. That's what we're here to do. Is we're here to work on the recommendation until it actually is fit for purpose for us. Now, the next speaker I have. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gould. Yes.
Point of order by Mr. Sturt. That's fine. I realise that the key is also that we need to find out whether the strengthening of, with the $1 million, which we're going to just detail for strengthening and enhancing the building, we've got to go ahead with that. Because if we don't, we're going to have an asset which is going to be useless. It's not going to be visited. It's going to be left standing. So we need to look at that option, and then from that strengthening process, then we know what the costs are with either option number 4 or option number 6A, as what's been talked about in number 5. From those sorts of options, then yes, the staff will go out to external funding to seek some support from different trusts, from gaming trusts, from the Energy Travel Trust, or from the Bay Trust, or from the government, from the Lotteries Commission. So it means that we won't be paying for the whole upgrade ourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. I have next Councillor Donaldson, then Mrs. Trumper, then Mr. Berryman Camp, and then Councillor Bentley, just so you know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be reasonably quick. I also do not support having a ghost facility sitting there for a lengthy period of time. And I agree that, so, I'm fully in support of the do-nothing approach to at least the minimum. Like Councillor Sturt, I like the curve of the banquet room on the external facade on that corner with the roundabout, so fully support 4 and then 6A as a possibility coming through to the LTP. The business case speaks for itself, and I think Councillor Tapsell's stated concerns about additional spend. That is a matter for the LTP, and that is something that I think will become quickly evident in terms of the level of support that we might secure through additional external funding. And we've got that decision ahead of us, so makes sense. I support.
Thank you. Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wholeheartedly agree and approve, and you guys have done an amazing job. Rotorua has grown since this building was built out here. The purpose has changed. The diversity of Rotorua is changed. our economy is growing, and we as a group of, well, I'll class myself as an elected person, we have to take responsibility to ensure that my children and my grandchildren and the generations coming in, we've got something for them to go to. So what sold me on this is it's an exploration. We have already funding in the budget for the $1 million investigation, and I think that we have to go through with this and get to a plan, and whether that is an extension of 4, 6 or any others. And I know that there are a group of people that are going to be involved in the planning, and I will put in a mention that access group should be part of that, because the disability access must be absolutely focused on also in any of your facilities, because I can say right now categorically it is appalling for wheelchairs and their support people to be sitting with them at any show, having been involved with people in chairs, and I think that that is an absolute critical thing that we need to focus on, apart from what everybody else has said.
Thank you. Mr. Berryman-Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick things. Look, I'll be supporting this because I think this is an aspirational development that looks at the future Rotorua which we wish to have. Just a quick response. Actually, Councillor Ken, I admire the future focus, actually, and I think that you are right. I guess the one thing that I am thinking of, my understanding is the majority of the lakefront area is actually owned by Pukerua or Ruawhata, which would mean that it would end up being a commercial development, which I guess is a possibility, but that enters into a whole different realm. However, I can update this committee. There have been discussions that I'm aware of with the unfortunate closure of the museum, whether or not Te Arawa should have its own whare taonga, whether or not we should be moving down those pathways. So actually, those thoughts and those discussions aren't closed off. I sense in this particular location that's likely to be more of a commercial rather than an iwi decision, which might be beyond our realm. But apart from that, I appreciate this. Got it?
Bentley. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a suggestion for the committee to consider that this $1 million worth of design work and so forth, we could, being seen as an arts centre, could we not utilise the $1 million odd we put aside for art every year to go towards paying for this?
It's an option. Now, are there any other speakers to this? No? Well, I'll just sum up. I'm fully in support of this proposal. I know, and I'm glad you referenced the pop-up shop, because this was a recurring theme for people wanting more opportunities to both attend and perform, and our building simply isn't fit for use in any. It's one of those spaces that is one size fits all, which actually means it never really fits anyone particularly well in any event, and it's always a major compromise. I'm very impressed with the workup that we've seen to date. It's thorough, it's canvassed a large proportion of our community, and it's collated a lot of that prior work that was done, but it's also incredibly current and truly does, I believe, reflect the information and the conversations out there for those who are interested in a performing arts centre. And I believe this is the next quantum step for our community to make. This is the first step of that. It is the detailed design step. That's what we're agreeing to today, to use the $1 million we set aside specifically for this purpose. When we get that information back, that will inform the future decisions we make in the long-term plan. And that will be another debate, and I'm sure it will be just as robust, and it ought to be, because it is a really important step we're taking. So on that note, the suggestion I'd like to ask is that we move them all together, and I'll just ask the mover and seconder if they're happy that we move the other two together, and we vote on those. Yes? All right, they are all related. Yes, okay, I have confirmation from Councillor Maxwell and Mrs. Trumper. Then in that case, I ask all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. That's councillors Kent and Bentley recorded against. And Kumar. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. It has indeed been very thorough. I think we will take a 10-minute break now. It seems an opportune time, and we'll be back at the table at 25 past. Thank you.